Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you today to Professor Bojana Petrić, who has kindly agreed to be interviewed for our Barleap PIM 2025. She will be known to many listeners, but I'd like to outline some of her major achievements to you. She is a distinguished scholar in the field of English for academic purposes and applied linguistics, and she's currently serving at Birkbeck University of London. Her extensive research and teaching experience have significantly contributed to understanding academic writing, particularly among multilingual students. Her research primarily focuses on academic writing skills and citation behaviours and the development of academic literacies among second language students. Her work often explores how students engage with sources, develop their written identities, and navigate disciplinary conventions. In addition to her research, she has undertaken several important editorial roles, such as acting as a board member for the Journal of English for Academic Purposes. She's also been a leading member of professional associations, such as the European Association for Teaching of Academic Writing. So welcome, Bojana, and thank you so much for sparing us this time today for this interview. I'd like to start by looking back at your early EAP experience. You began your career in ELT as a practitioner in what was former Yugoslavia. You then moved on to the Central European University in Budapest in the Centre for Academic Writing. With these early experiences in mind, can you tell us about the main influences which contributed to your early personal development in EAP?
Thank you very much, Jenny, for this introduction and this first question. I'm really delighted to be here, and hello to everybody listening at any point during the slow PIM event. So yes, that's right. My kind of the way I fell into EAP was when I got the position of the writing instructor at the Center for Academic Writing at Central European University in Budapest. And that was really my first encounter with EAP, which I think is not unusual for many EAP practitioners, at least of my generation. So at that point, I had already had training as an English language teacher and substantial experience, but none in terms of dealing with EAP. And also, I had no experience of being a student of EAP courses either. So that was quite a challenging start, which I think, again, is something that a lot of people will be nodding, and it will sound familiar to them. So I had to train myself on the job, and it was literally sink or swim, especially because when I started, the first thing to do was a pre-sessional. We all know how really challenging the pre-sessional courses can be, working intensively, developing materials, meeting new students, and so on. So that was a huge and very steep learning curve for me. But I think it also, in an interesting way, set the stage for what was to come throughout the professional career of an EAP practitioner, which is that you are always learning, you are always encountering new situations, you're always meeting new demands. There are new disciplinary backgrounds that your students bring. There are different L1, their language backgrounds, and different institutional demands. So constantly there is a need for continuous development, which from day one was the case of my story as well. And that said, I have to say that the previous experience of being an English teacher was very useful as well. So I had a sort of toolkit to draw on. I had a knowledge of the theories of learning a language, or experience of dealing with a classroom situation, all kinds of things that are necessary for a teacher. And in my career as an EAP practitioner researcher, I've encountered a lot of EAP practitioners with different kinds of study backgrounds. Some people have studied literature, others have studied completely different areas, science or law. And these are all very rich kind of repositories of knowledge and skills that EAP practitioners draw on. So that is another interesting element of our field, which I witnessed also in those early days. But you asked about some early experiences, the most important and formative experience for me was the actual day-to-day work in the Center for Academic Writing at Central European University, or CEU for short. We worked as a very tightly knit team of 8 to 9 people, depending on from year to year. We all had a similar kind of set of materials that we drew on, but we also supplemented those depending on which disciplinary areas we were allocated. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of intense work, and I have to say this was a kind of a training through immersion, let's say. So it was immersive teacher training for me. It was also very inspiring because it was all new to me. There was a lot to learn and develop. And later on, I branched into becoming a teacher trainer myself in academic writing area, which was another way of developing my expertise and my further interests. So that's another influence, so to speak. It was also a time of becoming familiar with some of the important work in EAP, the work of John Swales, Hyland, and so on. The time when I went to my first conference and presented my first presentation. Maybe we can talk about that later in more detail.
Yes.
So all those influences, but primarily, actually, the act of teaching were extremely influential at that stage.
That's really, really interesting to know. And you embarked on your PhD, I think, in 2000 in Budapest. Perhaps you can just tell us a little bit more about then what led you to take up this PhD. Its theme was a focus on students' citation practices, I believe. How was that developmental, and how did that come into being?
Thanks for that question. Yes, so I had completed an MA in applied linguistics and English language teaching, and then I wanted to just be a practitioner for a while. But then an idea came that I actually wanted to do further study. And when I got to Budapest, I found out about a fantastic PhD program at the State University, Eötvös Loránd. It was in English, so I could attend it. And it was extremely demanding program. It was a 5-year program. The first 2 years were they consisted of modules in all sorts of areas: research training, applied linguistics, discourse analysis, sociolinguistics, all kinds of areas. And after those 2 years, you were required to present a proposal for your study. So during those 2 years, of course, I had accumulated a lot of experience working with students at Central European University. And I saw many connections between what I was studying and what I was observing in my day-to-day practice. And I got really interested in the way that students were learning to write as academic, to master academic discourse. And I realized that although all the students, or most of the students, had English as a foreign or a second language, it was not the main obstacle for them. The obstacles were to do with mastering the rhetorics, mastering the disciplinary ways of writing. And in particular, the way they use sources was something they all grappled with. So that was the issue that really attracted my attention. And my PhD, which was titled Citation Practices in Student Academic Writing, tackled that issue. And I was interested in looking at both the texts that students write and to interview students and their supervisors. So I collected dissertations by students in one discipline. I focused on gender studies because I worked with that department. And I compared how students whose dissertations got top grades, how they use sources in comparison to those who barely passed their dissertations. And then I interviewed those students and also their supervisors. And to me, the work was fascinating. And I published some work out of that in the Journal for English for Academic Purposes. I'm still interested in that area, although now I research other areas. But it was a very important for me to focus on that topic for my PhD.
Sure, and I can see how developmental that must have been for you, maybe as an individual going through that PhD sort of study. Could you tell us a bit about the sort of mentoring or support that you got that helped you develop during that phase?
So at work, there was no formal mentor or coach that would have been assigned to me. But as I said, it was more a team effort. I call it immersive mentoring. So basically, through discussions, through working together, I absorbed sort of the values of the workplace, and it was a 9-to-5 job. So we didn't have the status of faculty as other faculty. We were considered more like office workers. So we were there 9-to-5, within which we had some teaching. And the rest was individual consultations with students who would sign up whenever they wanted. And we would read their drafts and talk to them about their drafts. But there was plenty of time for internal work of the team. So we worked a lot on materials development. Every year we conducted an extensive evaluation of the materials and the pre-sessional program and in-sessional offers that we put in place. And so through that work, there was a lot of mentoring received and given, or joint development of the team. And then new colleagues who entered the team went through the same process. So I think that's a very useful way to provide mentoring. And that was a good experience for me, even though there was a lot of disagreement as well about the direction we should take or decisions that should be made. But that's all very productive in the end, because it forces you to articulate your position or to maybe search for support for your position in the literature. So I think that's a very useful way of starting to work.
Absolutely.
But then,
please.
Oh yeah, shall I?
No, please carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, so later on, fast forward now, jumping into 2007, when I came to this country, and I became a lecturer in the Department of Linguistics and Language at the University of Essex. Well, there was a sort of formal mentoring structure. So I was assigned a mentor, and I know a lot of people said, oh, well, you just meet for coffee once a year and that's it. It's not very useful. But I was extremely lucky because my mentor was also my colleague and later on research collaborator, Nigel Howard, who is now at the University of Sheffield. And so Nigel was extremely helpful in helping me learn to navigate a new educational system and being in the department rather than being in an EAP unit. And we spent a lot of time discussing various educational issues, developing syllabi. We were co-directors of an MA program in ESP, so there were lots of interesting issues arising there. We co-supervised students, we did research together. So it was a very collaborative relationship, which initially was termed as a mentorship, but it grew into something much more productive, let's say.
Great. No, very interesting to hear about your sort of experiential learning, if you like, immersion on the job, if you like. Can you tell me maybe a little bit more about any particular theories or approaches that have been particularly influential in your own EAP development?
Yes, that's an interesting topic. What sort of things people get influenced by? So initially, for me, the first encounter was with genre analysis, genre approaches to teaching, the John Swale's work, the issues of disciplinarity, discourse communities, the work of Ken Hyland and Jones. And that was very influential, very directly applicable to practical solutions in the classroom. So I remember looking for nice exemplars of genres to use for classes and to engage students in analyzing moves. And it was very rewarding to see immediate effect, how students would sort of, when they get it, they were like, oh yes, that's how I can write it. So the empowering effect of knowledge about the rhetorical structure of a particular genre. But later on, I got really interested in social views of writing, and more kind of seeing writing as a social practice, and looking at the relationship around writing and also social factors that influence writing. So I got really interested in the academic literacies approach. And one of the books that really influenced me was the book by Ros Ivanic on writing and identity, also the work of Theresa Lillis and Curry, and the many concepts that they introduce. For example, the concept of the literacy broker and all the individuals that take part in somebody's writing output, so to speak, the idea of the social network that surrounds the act of writing. And so that all became something that really occupied me for a time. And actually it led to the decision also in my PhD to not just look at texts, but also to interview writers and those who supported student writing, because these views are extremely important. And to this day, I am still interested in the experiences of writers, be they students or scholars, academics.
Would it be right to consider the sort of shifting sands of academic literacies? You know, the world is changing all the time. So the way we write within a particular discipline is, of course, going to change. I mean, is it ever easy to button that down, or we have to completely... We're still catching up on ourselves all the time in that respect?
Absolutely. I think it's always been true that genres are changing, ways of writing are changing, but maybe even more so in the times that we live in, where the time of very rapid changes. So at the moment we are witnessing the effects, early effects maybe, of a new technology, AI, and this is unfolding in front of our eyes. And I think we're all a little bit caught in the process of trying to understand what is it, how it works, how students are using it, what are the effects on our pedagogy. So, and of course, the changes in the wider world, they all affect the way people interact with literacy, with writing and reading texts. So it's helpful to look at other theories as well. It's helpful to look at sociology of science, for example. Today I'm more eclectic in terms of theories, theoretical influences. I like to read around. Yeah, it would be difficult to identify one particular theoretical strand, really. Yes.
Of course. Just moving on, just exploring maybe the conference theme in a slightly different way. You did mention earlier that you might like to make some mention of your experience of materials development. I don't know if there's anything further you'd like to say about that, and also your involvement in student supervision. Would you like?
Yes, thanks for that. So both of these areas were very important for me, and I think they could be very important for everybody dealing with EAP, particularly materials development. I think that is one of the most valuable tools for professional development, being engaged in materials development. It's an area where EAP practitioners can be very creative, but at the same time, they're also constrained because we need to take into account what the materials are for, what needs they are responding to, how they match the course that we are teaching. Do we have enough time for it? Do we have the resources? So it's a constant sort of back and forth between some sort of individuality and creativity that and our preferences, but also the very concrete needs in a context in which we are teaching. And I think that's a very useful skill to develop, which is also extremely rewarding. So we learn a lot through developing materials.
Yes,
and the other area that I'd like to focus on a little bit is supervision. which is something I love doing. It's one of the most interesting aspects of my job, supervising projects by students at all levels, undergraduate, masters, and of course PhD, because that's the most in-depth and most developed sort of work that students do. The interest here really is in helping somebody who has an initial idea to kind of follow through that idea and come up with something that is systematically done, thoroughly investigated, and in the end they produce something that remains there to be read. It's a journey both for the student and the supervisor. And for me, there's always some sort of surprising element, what people see in a data set, or what they find, or what ideas they come up with, and then how we try to figure out what makes sense in terms of a research project. And I've had some fantastic supervisees who are now scholars themselves. So it's a very rewarding experience. But also supervision is one of those social processes around academic writing that I'm interested in as a researcher as well. And I'd like to mention here a project that I collaborated on with Nigel a few years back now, quite a few now, while we were still both teaching at Essex. So we were interested in how students navigate supervision. And we followed master students in a number of disciplinary areas from the moment when they wrote their initial dissertation proposal to the moment after they've submitted their dissertation for marking. So we repeatedly interviewed them, we collected their drafts, we asked them to write a log about what they were reading and writing. We interviewed their supervisors, those who agreed to talk to us. And one of the results of that is a book, which I'd like to show here.
Yes,
so
fantastic.
It's called Experiencing Master Supervision. So we were interested in how students experience that journey, also their supervisors. And we were fascinated by some of the findings. One of them being how different the supervisory practices are across the departments. What is considered to be normal practice in one department would be considered either too much guidance or not enough guidance in another. So that was an interesting finding. But we were also interested in how students varied in their approaches to this task.
What can we learn from your findings? I mean, what could be applied, or how would that help us, do you think, navigate that whole landscape of supervision?
Yes, I think one of the lessons for supervisors, perhaps, is that what is necessary is to adopt a kind of flexible attitude. So to be an adaptable supervisor. Adaptable in the sense that it's necessary to gauge what a student needs at what point. So some students start off with saying, I really want to be told everything, what I need to do. Tell me, I want to be told. And then later on, they developed and they realized that actually they're completely capable of driving the project in the direction where they want to go. So so the supervisor's role is very important in the beginning, and then they should let them go and become less directive and sort of give them more freedom. Sometimes it's to do with emotional support, giving them confidence. So there are different areas that perhaps supervisors would benefit from some training in these areas that they don't get. So they learn on the job as well.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
And there are also lessons for I think for EAP practitioners as well, because they are really positioned well in a little bit outside of the department. So it's a kind of neutral figure who is ideally positioned to listen to these issues that sometimes students don't want to share with their supervisors because they feel intimidated, or they feel they would show some aspect of their lack of knowledge, which they are not supposed to do. So that's where the EAP tutor is really a very helpful figure to help with this process. Sounding board, exactly.
Yes, indeed. Great. Let's move on a little bit. A big question for you now, and it's really looking back across your whole journey, if you like, and asking if you could relive that journey again, would you do anything differently, and why?
That's
Sorry,
an
it's the big one,
extremely
isn't it?
difficult one.
Yeah.
Very difficult one. And partly difficult because if I look back, it's hard to say which things in the journey are a result of something I intentionally did, and which things that just happened, or something happened and I had to respond to that. So maybe I'll start by saying which things I wouldn't change. So I wouldn't change the fact that I worked in different contexts and different institutions. I think each of those contexts taught me something very important, and moving through them enriched my experience and my knowledge for that I used in the next one. I also wouldn't change the fact that I went on to study, to do my PhD, to engage in research. It really was very rewarding, and it opened a lot of doors and allowed me to meet a lot of very interesting people. And another thing that really just happened along the way, I was extremely lucky to come across very helpful individuals all the time. It just happened that way. Individuals who were very helpful, who opened doors to me or gave me some advice that was very, very important. And I really hope to do that for others. Now, what I would change, I think I would worry less. I would worry less about unimportant things, which, of course, it's easy to say now, but in those moments, you're not sure what is important and what isn't. But often some of the institutional demands turned out to be very short-lived, and perhaps you spent a lot of time, but they turned out to be changed very quickly, and actually it was time not well spent. And maybe another thing which I didn't do as much, which I could have, is make stronger links from one place to the next where I worked. And I was thinking why that happened. I think because in each new context, I had a lot to learn in the beginning, and I had to really immerse myself in order to do that. And although both people and issues resurfaced later, maybe this is the next stage for me, sort of connecting different places and people in something in the next stage.
Indeed, I mean, the EAP landscape these days is, I think everyone would possibly agree, is a challenging one. What sort of obstacles and threats do you perceive today when you look around your working environment, the field you work in? How could they be addressed? I mean, what are your thoughts about this?
That leads us to some gloomy topics, and unfortunately, EAP is vulnerable to sort of existential threat. I don't mean EAP as a field, but EAP units and practitioners. And at the moment, we are facing a very difficult situations with many institutions closing down EAP units and cutting EAP jobs. And it's a constant theme, unfortunately. I remember even back in those days at Central European University, at one point we were threatened with closure because the university had to make cuts. And of course, the first place to make a cut is something that looks like a luxury or unnecessary to often to management. So this is something that we are faced with again with more intensity, I think, because of the financial pressures at universities, and it's hard to see how this will develop at the moment. It's really a big obstacle that it's hard for us to resolve. But for example, the recent statement, the Balib statement about the cuts, I think is a very important response. So it's really good that as a field we are putting some resistance or drawing attention to this fact and making a statement that's the best we can do at this moment. And yeah, let's see what happens.
Looking forward then to the future of EAP, as we're sort of starting to talk about that, sort of two questions really rolled into one, if you don't mind. What factors do you think will be important in the development of EAP? And slightly different question, what developments would you like to see in EAP?
Yes, great questions. I think one thing we've seen throughout the years of EAP is that it's an amazingly resilient field. So we've managed to survive, and I think this will continue. And that's what I would like to see in the future. But yeah, there are factors that will be hugely influential in the sort of big picture. The two ones I see are, first of all, the future of higher education. There are lots of threats to higher education and factors that will maybe change it. It might look completely different in the future from what we see today. And the other one is technology. Actually, they are very much related. So we are really living through times of big changes in all sorts of areas. And so that will inevitably have an impact on EAP, because EAP is so much related to what happens to higher education. So yeah, so that's something that is there to be seen. But what I would like to see in terms of development, I could talk about topics. I think we're quite good at branching out into different topics, and EAP is becoming more transdisciplinary, which is very, very good, very exciting. But I think it would be also good to be more self-confident as a field, and to start generating concepts that would be then something that can be adopted by other fields. I think EAP is well positioned to do that, because it sort of straddles interesting both institutional and disciplinary areas and topics of language and education and social justice. And so it's all kind of intertwined. So I would like to see more self-confidence, more boldness, but also from the outside, more recognition. So more recognition, both institutionally from the institutions where EAP is situated, but also from the academic world in general, so academic disciplines as well, because often it's seen as a less important discipline than, let's say, applied linguistics or theoretical linguistics or literature.
Mm-hmm. Great. No, very, very useful and helpful and interesting advice there. That's great. Just one final question, really, just to finish the interview here. And again, coming back to you, sort of personal question, what advice would you give to new EAP practitioners wishing to develop their careers?
That's a great question. And what is nice about our field is that there are always new enthusiastic entrants. And so I would tell them to do everything to keep your enthusiasm. And one thing to do that is to keep doing what you're passionate about. So follow your passions, your interests. If that is further study, go for further study. If that is going into teacher training, that's wonderful. If that is organizing events, networking, that is also great. So whatever you do with a full heart. And the other thing I would say is that you might find yourself in an institution that is not very supportive, or where you're working on your own. There is not much of a common sense of a community. Depends. Some institutions are great in that sense, others not. But regardless of that, always try to branch out outside of your institution. It's really fantastic to get engaged in organizations such as BALIP or BAL or other ones, or for example, do something with, collaborate with journals, do book reviews, or review manuscripts. So developing your sort of networks and engagement outside of the institution, I think it's really, really important. And it will give you a sense of greater community out there as well.
Yes, indeed. Great. Thank you very much. Positive note to finish on. And just like to say thank you again so much for your time today. It's been really interesting to hear what you had to say. And I'm sure our listeners are going to really enjoy the interview. Thank you so much, Bojana.
Thank you, Jenny. And thanks for all the interesting questions you asked me.